The sun rose slowly over the town of Odirin, brushing the dusty streets with a soft gold light. The sound of hammers and distant chatter filled the air as the town woke up to another busy day. Among the noise stood Daniel Okoro's garage, a place known for its honesty, discipline, and the smell of oil and metal. Inside, Daniel Okoro, a tall man in his late 40s, wiped grease from his hands and studied the engine before him. His movements were steady and confident, the kind of confidence that comes from years of hard work and survival. Life had never been easy for Daniel, but he had made peace with that. In his mind, success came only through sweat, not dreams. Every morning, Daniel rose before the first rooster crowed. He prayed quietly, brewed his strong black tea, and walked the same path to his workshop. His world was built on rules, order, and effort. Anything outside of that, especially art, music, or dreams, felt like a distraction. But that morning, as Daniel worked beneath the open sky, there was another presence in the garage, a quiet rhythm that didn't match the sound of wrenches or machines. At the back of the workshop, behind a pile of old tires, Zuri Okoro, his 17-year-old daughter, sat cross-legged with a sketchbook in her lap. Her pencil moved softly across the page, tracing the image of her father. His hands strong, his face serious, his eyes tired but full of purpose. To Zuri, her father was the perfect painting, not because he was gentle, but because he was real. Every line on his face told a story. Every scar spoke of love and struggle. She glanced up now and then, trying to capture the light that hit his cheek, but Daniel never noticed. To him, she was simply sitting there again. "Wasting time! Zuri," he said sharply, not looking up from the engine. "Don't you have homework to do?" Zuri smiled faintly, still sketching. "I finished it already, Papa," he frowned. "Then find something useful to do. Come help me clean these tools." "Yes, Papa," she murmured, setting her pencil down reluctantly. As she walked toward him, Daniel's eyes fell on the open page she'd left behind. There he was, drawn with remarkable detail and emotion. The hands looked almost alive. He stared for a second, but his pride would not let him show surprise. Instead, he closed the book. "You and this drawing," he muttered. "It will not put food on your table one day." Zuri froze, her smile fading. "It's not just drawing, Papa. It's what I love." Daniel sighed heavily and looked at her, a serious gaze full of both love and fear. "Zuri, love doesn't pay the bills. The world doesn't care about dreams. You have to learn something real, something that will keep you safe." He turned away before she could answer, his voice soft but firm, final like a door closing. Zuri stood still for a long time, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. The weight of his words pressed on her heart, but the fire inside her didn't die. She knew her father worked hard for her future. She also knew he didn't understand that her art was her future. Later that evening, as Daniel sat by the small radio, listening to the evening news, Zuri sat by the window, sketching again. The orange glow of sunset wrapped her in quiet determination. She whispered softly to herself, "One day, he'll see." Daniel looked over at her silhouette in the fading light. He didn't speak, but his heart stirred. A faint worry he couldn't name. He feared the world would hurt her. He feared dreams would lead her astray. He didn't realize that his fear itself was already breaking the bridge between them. Outside, the town slowly darkened, the sounds of laughter and distant music rising. Inside the Okoro home, silence settled. The kind of silence filled not with peace, but with distance. Daniel leaned back in his chair, eyes heavy. "I just want her to have a better life," he whispered to himself. At the window, Zuri's pencil stopped moving. A tear rolled down her cheek as she turned another page and began a new drawing. Not of her father this time, but of herself, standing alone, reaching toward a blank sky. The school compound buzzed with life that morning. Students laughed, teachers called out names, and the smell of chalk mixed with dust filled the air. Inside the hall, colorful paintings lined the walls, the school's annual art exhibition. Each piece told a story of the town. Children playing in red soil, mothers balancing water pots, men fixing cars under the hot sun. But one painting stood out. A breathtaking image of a mechanic's hands covered in grease, gently repairing a broken bicycle. The background glowed with sunlight, and hidden in one corner were the faint letters, "To the man who fixes more than he knows." It was Zuri's painting. The crowd surrounded it, whispering in admiration. The judges nodded approvingly. When the results were announced, Zuri's heart stopped for a moment before she heard her name echo through the loudspeaker. Winner of this year's competition, Zuri Okoro. The students cheered. Teachers clapped. Her art teacher, Mrs. Amara, a graceful woman with kind eyes, smiled proudly. Zuri stood there, overwhelmed, tears threatening to fall. She didn't win just for herself. She had painted her father's world, their life, their bond. Deep down, she hoped that maybe, just maybe, this would make him proud. That evening, Daniel was bent under a car hood when his phone rang. He wiped his hands on a rag and answered gruffly, "Mr. Okoro, this is Principal Obina from Bright Future Secondary School. Congratulations. Your daughter, Zuri, won the art competition. Her painting is remarkable. She has a gift. We'll be sending a letter about a scholarship she's qualified for." Daniel's face hardened. "Art competition?" he repeated. "Yes, sir. She captured something truly beautiful. Your hands, your work, your strength. We think she has real potential." Daniel cut him off politely but firmly. "Thank you, sir. I'll talk to her." He ended the call and stood still for a long time. His workers exchanged glances but said nothing. The pride flickered in his chest for a brief second, then quickly turned into worry. He pictured neighbors gossiping, saying his daughter would leave school to chase pictures. He imagined her ending up poor, struggling, and blaming him for not stopping her. His jaw tightened. When he got home, Zuri was waiting eagerly by the door, still holding her certificate. Her eyes sparkled with hope. "Papa, I have something to show you." Daniel didn't return her smile. He dropped his tool bag on the chair. "I already heard," he said flatly. The school called. Zuri blinked, confused by his tone. "Isn't it wonderful? They said I might get a scholarship to study art in Lagos." Daniel's voice rose, sharp and cold. "Art? Lagos? Zuri, have you lost your mind?" Her smile faded instantly. "But Papa, do you think life is a painting? That people will feed you because you can draw?" He snapped. "No one survives on dreams, Zuri. You need a real career. Accounting, engineering, something solid." Zuri's voice trembled. "But I don't want to be an accountant. I want to create. I want to show the world what I see." Daniel turned away. "You see too much. The world doesn't care what you see, only what you can do." Silence filled the room, heavy and painful. Zuri's hands tightened around her certificate. The paper crumpled slightly. "You didn't even look at my painting," she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. His fear of losing control over her future was louder than his love in that moment. She went to her room quietly, tears burning her eyes. That night, she sat at her desk staring at her half-finished sketch. Her pencil didn't move. For the first time, she wondered if maybe he was right. Maybe dreams were only for people luckier than her. The next day, Mrs. Amara came to the garage. She smiled politely at Daniel as he wiped his hands. "Good afternoon, Mr. Okoro. I came to speak about Zuri's scholarship." Daniel frowned. "Madam, I appreciate your concern, but there is nothing to speak about. My daughter will finish secondary school and study something useful." Mrs. Amara's eyes softened. "Sir, your daughter has something rare. Her art carries truth, emotion. She paints what she feels. I've seen many students, but none like her. Daniel crossed his arms. Emotion doesn't feed anyone, madam. I know what it means to go hungry. My daughter won't live like that. Then let her use her gift to make a better life, Mrs. Amara pleaded gently. Art isn't weakness, Mr. Okoro. It's courage. He shook his head. Courage doesn't pay rent. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of metal tools echoed through the workshop, filling the silence. Mrs. Amara finally sighed. One day, she'll make you proud, Mr. Okoro. I just hope it won't be too late. She turned and left. Daniel watched her go, his chest tight. He didn't want to be the villain. He wanted to protect his child. But every word from that teacher felt like a challenge to his entire life's belief that survival came before passion. That evening, Zuri didn't touch her sketchbook. She sat by the window again, staring at the moonlight spilling through the curtains. Her fingers itched to draw, but her heart felt heavy. Days passed. The pencils stayed untouched. The colors dried. Her laughter faded from the house. Daniel noticed the silence, but mistook it for maturity. Good, he told himself. She's finally focusing on her future. But late at night, when he walked past her room, he sometimes saw her awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, as if searching for something the world had taken from her. The house had never been quieter. The months slipped by quietly, one blending into the next. The garage buzzed with the same sounds, clanking tools, engines roaring to life, and Daniel's steady voice calling out instructions. But something was missing. Zuri's laughter. She had finished school at the top of her class, just as her father had wanted. Yet when neighbors congratulated her, they often asked the same question. So, what will she do next? Daniel always answered proudly, she will study accounting at the university. But inside, Zuri felt hollow. Each word from her father sounded like a brick, sealing her away from who she really was. At night, she still dreamed of colors, of faces, of stories waiting to be painted. But she hid those dreams carefully, like fragile glass, safe only in her heart. Then one afternoon, as she walked home from the market, she noticed a poster stuck to a wall. It read, National Young Artists Contest, open to all. Winners will be featured in Lagos Art Week. Her heart pounded. She read it again and again. That night, when Daniel had gone to bed, Zuri sat by the dim light of her lamp, filling out the application form. She knew he wouldn't approve. He never did. But something inside her whispered that this was her chance. She mailed it secretly the next day, praying that fate would at least hear her once. Weeks passed. Then, one morning, while hanging laundry outside, a young boy ran up the street shouting, Zuri! They printed your name in the paper. You're in the contest. Zuri froze, her hands trembling as she grabbed the paper. There it was, her name in bold, listed among the finalists. Her heart soared. For the first time in months, she smiled without fear. But fate has a way of testing joy. That evening, Daniel was at his friend's shop when he overheard two men talking. Did you see that flyer? That Okoro's daughter is entering some art show. Ha! That man can fix cars, but can he fix that girl's head? The laughter stung. Daniel's hands tightened around his cup of tea. By the time he reached home, his face was cold as iron. Zuri looked up from her desk, startled. Papa, don't say a word, he barked, throwing the newspaper onto the table. So it's true. You went behind my back. Zuri's voice shook. Papa, I just wanted to try to embarrass me? To make people think I can't control my own daughter? He roared, stepping closer. Tears welled in Zuri's eyes. It's not about control. It's about my dream. Why can't you believe in me? Daniel's chest heaved. Because I know the world, Zuri. I've bled for every coin I earned. You think life is soft like paint on paper? It will chew you up and spit you out. She took a trembling step back. Then let me find out for myself. But Daniel's pride had already taken over his heart. He grabbed the sketchbook from her desk, pages full of color, love, and stories. And in a burst of rage, he tore it apart. The sound of paper ripping filled the house like thunder. Zuri screamed, "Papa, please!" But he didn't stop until the last page was in shreds. When it was over, silence fell. Only the sound of her sobs broke the air. Daniel stood there, breathing hard, his hands shaking. For a moment, his eyes softened. He saw the pain in her face, but his pride forced him to turn away. "You will not go to that contest," he said quietly. "You will not waste your life chasing shadows." Zuri's voice came out as a whisper, broken but firm. "Then I have no life here." That night, when the world slept, she packed a small bag, a change of clothes, a few coins, and a blank sketchbook she had hidden under her bed. She looked around the room one last time. The cracked walls, the small window, the chair where her father used to sit and watch her draw. Then she slipped out quietly into the night, her heart pounding, tears blurring her vision. The moon hung above like a silent witness as she walked down the empty road. At dawn, Daniel woke to the sound of silence. The door to Zuri's room was open. Her bed was neatly made, her favorite scarf folded on the chair. He called her name once, then twice. No answer. He walked into her room slowly, his breath catching when he saw what was missing. Her bag, her sketchbook, her laughter. On the table lay a small piece of paper with a pencil drawing of a little girl holding her father's hand. Underneath it, in shaky handwriting, she had written, "I'll make you proud one day." Daniel sat down on the edge of her bed. For the first time in years, his hands trembled. Not from anger, but from fear. He wanted to run after her, to call her name in the streets. But his pride whispered, "She'll come back. She has to." So he waited. But the house stayed quiet. The chair across from him stayed empty. The morning light crept in through the window and fell across the torn pages on the floor. The pieces of his daughter's dreams. And for the first time, Daniel Okoro realized that the silence he had created was louder than any engine he had ever fixed. The city was nothing like the quiet town Zuri had known. The roads were crowded with blaring horns, the air thick with dust and exhaust. Zuri clutched her small bag tightly as she stepped off the old bus in Lagos, her heart beating with both fear and hope. She had no family here, no friends, only her dream, fragile, flickering, but still alive. For the first few nights, she stayed in a small hostel near the art center. The room smelled of paint and old wood, but it was cheap, and it had a desk, enough for her to draw. During the day, she worked at a food stall, serving rice and stew to office workers. The pay was small, but every night she returned to her tiny room and painted by candlelight, her hands stained with color. Each brush stroke felt like a piece of her heart trying to heal. But pain followed her like a shadow. Sometimes she caught herself staring at the empty space beside her, where her father should have been. She still remembered his voice, harsh but strong, his hands rough but steady. And deep down, she still wished he would walk through the door and say, "I was wrong." Meanwhile, back in the village, Daniel was a different man. Days passed like heavy stones. He went to the garage, fixed cars, gave orders, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. Every evening he came home to silence. No laughter, no music, no sound of pencils scratching on paper. Her room stayed just as she left it. Sometimes he would stand at the doorway, staring at the small drawing she'd left behind. The one of a little girl holding her father's hand. He couldn't bring himself to take it down. At night, he'd sit outside under the stars, holding her old paintbrush. The men at the tea shop had stopped joking about his daughter. Now, when they saw him, they lowered their eyes and spoke softly. Everyone knew Everyone had seen the pain. Daniel tried to write her a letter once. He sat at the table for hours, the paper in front of him blank. What could he say? Come home? I'm sorry? The words felt too small for the hole inside his chest. He never sent the letter. Zuri's trial weeks turned into months. The art contest was approaching, but Zuri was struggling. Supplies cost more than she had, and rent was due soon. She painted on scraps of cardboard when she couldn't afford canvas. Her fingers cracked from washing dishes at work. One rainy night, exhausted and soaked, she nearly gave up. She sat by the window, tears mixing with the rain dripping from her hair. Maybe Papa was right, she whispered. Maybe dreams don't feed you. But then she opened her sketchbook. The last page was a faint pencil drawing, her father's face, drawn from memory. She touched it gently and smiled through her tears. No, she said softly. Dreams teach you to feed yourself. That night, something changed. She began painting with everything she had, using colors she mixed herself, grinding bits of chalk, dirt, and leftover paint. The result wasn't perfect, but it was real. Her final piece for the contest was titled Hands That Build, Hands That Break. It showed a father's hands, strong, calloused, holding a child's hands covered in paint. Between them, a torn piece of paper slowly mended itself. When she delivered it to the contest office, she felt light for the first time in months. Daniel's realization back home. Daniel was fixing a truck when his old friend Musa stopped by. Did you hear? Musa said. Your daughter. She's in the city. Her painting made it to the finals. They'll be showing it at the art center. Daniel froze. For a moment, he didn't believe it. Are you sure? Musa smiled. It's in the paper. You raised a brave one, my friend. That night, Daniel sat by the fire, staring at the glowing embers. Pride and guilt battled inside him. He remembered the day he tore her drawings. The look in her eyes, the silence that followed. He realized then that he hadn't just broken her art. He had broken something inside himself. The next morning, he packed a small bag, closed the garage, and boarded the bus to Lagos. The day of the contest, the exhibition hall buzzed with excitement. Paintings lined the walls, each one telling a story of struggle and hope. Zuri stood quietly at the back, wearing a simple white dress. She didn't care if she won. Just being there, being seen, was victory enough. Then, from across the room, she saw a familiar figure. Older, weary, his eyes searching. Her breath caught. Papa? Daniel stopped in his tracks, seeing her for the first time in months. His face softened, tears welling. He walked slowly toward her, each step heavy with emotion. When he reached her, he looked at the painting. The strong hands, the gentle ones, the mending paper. He whispered, You painted us. Zuri nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, because no matter how broken, we still belong together. Daniel's voice trembled. Zuri, I was wrong. I thought I was protecting you, but I was only protecting my fear. Zuri stepped forward and hugged him tightly. And I thought I had to leave to prove something. But all I ever wanted was for you to see me. The hall fell silent for a moment. A father and daughter, reunited in the glow of forgiveness. Later that evening, the announcer stepped onto the stage. The winner of this year's National Young Artists Contest is Zuri Okoro for her piece, Hands That Build, Hands That Break. Applause filled the room. Zuri covered her mouth in shock, tears falling freely. Daniel clapped harder than anyone else, his face shining with pride. When she turned to look at him, he mouthed the words he should have said long ago. I believe in you. The night of the contest lingered in Daniel's mind long after the applause faded. He and Zuri walked out of the art center together, the air filled with the soft hum of city life. Distant horns, laughter, and music spilling from open windows, but between them, there was only quiet peace. For the first time in a long while, silence didn't hurt. They stopped under a streetlight. Daniel turned to his daughter, unsure where to begin. His voice came out low and rough. "Zuri, you've grown into everything I was too blind to see." She smiled faintly, brushing tears from her cheeks. "And you've always been everything I wanted to be. Strong. Just not like that." They both laughed softly through their tears. Daniel looked around at the bustling city, then back at her. "You belong here, don't you?" Zuri hesitated. "Maybe, but part of me will always belong back home. With you," he nodded slowly. "Then let's go home." The road back the next morning, they boarded the early bus. The city gave way to fields, then to dusty roads, then to the small village where their story began. Zuri watched the scenery pass. The same trees, the same crooked fences, but everything looked different now. When they arrived, the neighbors peeked through their doors. The whole town had heard what happened, how Daniel's daughter had won the art contest, how her painting had been shown across the country. Daniel held his head high, not with arrogance this time, but with quiet gratitude. At home, everything was just as she had left it. The cracked walls, the chair by the window, the old table covered in tools. But it didn't feel heavy anymore. Zuri walked into her room and froze. On her desk, neatly stacked, were the torn pages of her old sketchbook. Every one she thought was lost. Someone had tried to piece them together. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching her eyes fill with tears. "I couldn't throw them away," he said softly. "Every night I tried to fix what I broke." Zuri ran her fingers over the torn pages, her heart swelling. "You already have." A new beginning, in the weeks that followed, something beautiful began to grow between them. Daniel went back to work at the garage, but things had changed. He talked to his customers differently now, with patience, with warmth. Sometimes he'd point at the small painting Zuri made for the shop, a portrait of him smiling beside a car engine, and say proudly, "My daughter painted that." Zuri, meanwhile, started teaching art to local children in the evenings. She used the back room of the community hall, cracked walls, broken chairs, and all. The kids came running every afternoon, their laughter echoing through the village. One day, Daniel visited her class. He stood quietly at the door as the children painted. His eyes softened when he saw the joy in their faces, the same joy Zuri once had. After class, he picked up a brush hesitantly. "Show me how to hold it," he said. Zuri grinned. "Like this." Their hands met, his rough, hers gentle. And together they painted their first picture, a small house under a bright orange sun. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. The Festival of Unity, a few months later, the village announced a cultural festival. Music, food, crafts, and art. For the first time, Daniel volunteered to help organize it. He even built wooden stands for Zuri's students to display their paintings. On the day of the festival, the village square shimmered with color. Children laughed, women sold handmade crafts, and drums beat softly in the distance. Zuri's art stall was the highlight, a collection of drawings showing village life, families, laughter, and love. At the center hung one special painting, The Mechanic and His Daughter. It showed Daniel at his workbench, Zuri beside him, both smiling. When people stopped to admire it, Daniel would chuckle and say, "That's us. We fix engines. And hearts, too." The crowd laughed, but Zuri could see the emotion in his eyes. He wasn't ashamed anymore. He was proud. Not the kind of pride that divides, but the kind that heals. Quiet Reflections. That evening, after the festival ended, they sat outside their home under the stars. The air was cool, and the smell of roasted corn drifted from nearby. Daniel leaned back in his chair. You know, I used to think dreams were for people who had time to waste. But I was wrong. Dreams are what keep people alive. Zuri smiled. And I used to think I had to fight you to be seen. But now I know. I just had to forgive. They sat in silence for a while, the night alive with the sound of crickets. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a tiny wooden frame. Inside it was the torn drawing she had left behind when she ran away. The little girl holding her father's hand. He had mended it, carefully, and written underneath in neat letters. She made me proud. Zuri's eyes filled with tears. She placed her hand over his. You already did, Papa. You always did. A legacy, reborn months later, Zuri received a letter, an invitation to hold her first solo art exhibition in the city. It was her dream come true. She showed it to Daniel, nervous and excited. It's in Lagos again. They want me to show my story. Our story. Daniel smiled warmly. Then let's tell it together. At the exhibition, father and daughter stood side by side as people admired her paintings, scenes of home, family, and second chances. When the crowd asked about her inspiration, Zuri said simply, My father taught me that love is not about control. It's about belief. And when you believe in someone, even broken things can become beautiful again. The audience applauded, but Daniel's heart was already full. He turned to her and whispered, You've taught me more than I ever taught you. Final scene. Full circle back home, months later. The sun rose over the village, warm, golden, peaceful. Daniel stood outside the garage, the hum of morning filling the air. Zuri sat nearby, sketching as children gathered around her. He smiled as he watched her draw, her laughter bright, her heart free. A customer approached and said, Master Daniel, your daughter is famous now. Are you still working? Daniel chuckled, wiping his hands. Of course. She paints dreams, and I fix the engines that drive them. The man laughed and walked away. Daniel turned back toward his daughter. She looked up and caught his eye. They exchanged a smile, one that said everything words never could. As the camera would fade out, the final image would linger. A father and daughter, side by side. Her hands covered in color, his in grease, both marked by love, forgiveness, and pride reborn. The rain had just stopped when the bus pulled into Odorin's small, dusty terminal. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke from nearby fires. Zuri stepped down slowly, her small suitcase in hand. Her heart beat fast. Not from fear, but from the weight of what waited ahead. It had been over a year since she'd last walked these roads. The houses looked the same, but time had changed her. She was no longer the timid girl who once hid her drawings under the bed. She had found her voice, her art, her truth. Yet, as she moved through the familiar streets, every corner whispered her father's name. When she reached the gate of their home, she stopped. The metal creaked softly in the breeze. She hesitated, unsure if she should knock or simply walk in. Before she could decide, the door opened. Daniel Okoro stood there. He looked older, smaller somehow, not in body, but in spirit. The fire in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by something gentler, heavier. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Zuri's eyes glistened. Papa. Daniel's lips trembled as he whispered, You came home. Inside, the house felt both strange and familiar. But then Zuri noticed something that made her breath catch. On the walls, every wall, hung her old sketches. The torn pages she thought were gone had been carefully taped and framed. Even the one he had once ripped apart was there, its edges mended with golden thread. Daniel followed her gaze. His voice cracked. I didn't know how to say I was sorry, so I did this instead. Zuri touched the nearest frame. A drawing of the garage at sunset. Her eyes filled with tears. You kept them all. I hurt you, Zuri, Daniel said quietly, stepping closer. I thought I was protecting you, but I was only protecting my fear. You wanted to fly, and I kept you in a cage. His words trembled with honesty, his eyes wet but unashamed. Every night I sat here waiting, listening for the sound of your footsteps. The house was too quiet without you. Zuri set her bag down and walked toward him. I missed you too, Papa. Every time I painted, I saw you. Even when I was angry, I painted your hands. The same hands that worked for me, even when they trembled with pride. Daniel's tears finally fell. He reached for her sketchbook, the one she'd left behind, and held it close to his chest. I was wrong, he said, voice breaking. You didn't need to become what I wanted. You were already more than I ever dreamed. Zuri stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. For a moment, time stopped. The world outside faded, leaving only the sound of their quiet sobs and the soft beating of two hearts finally in rhythm again. That evening, the rain began again, gentle, cleansing. Zuri stood in the garage doorway, watching her father work. But something was different this time. Half the space had been cleared and painted white. A small easel stood near the window, brushes and paints neatly arranged beside the tools. Daniel looked up and smiled. It's yours, he said simply. Half the garage for fixing cars, half for creating art. Both honest work. Zuri laughed through her tears. You really mean it? He nodded. I do. From now on, this place builds dreams, not breaks them. As night fell, Daniel and Zuri stood side by side, the warm glow from the workshop light spilling into the rain. He looked at her, pride soft and pure in his eyes. This is my daughter, he said quietly, almost to himself. My daughter, the artist. Zuri smiled, her heart finally at peace. The camera would fade out slowly on that image. Father and daughter standing together, hands stained with color and oil, a single lantern glowing between them. The darkness that once divided them had become light. The years rolled by quietly, like pages turning in a well-loved book. Odirin, the small town that once slept under the hum of old engines and dusty roads, had changed. Its walls now carried color. Murals of hope, laughter, and unity. Each stroke told a story, and every story carried one name, Zuri Okoro. At the center of town, near the market, stood her largest mural yet. It showed a father and daughter standing side by side beneath bright skies. Their hands were joined, one stained with paint, the other with grease. Beneath them, in bold letters, read the words, Dreams don't divide, they build. They, every passerby, stopped to stare. Some smiled, some sighed, but all felt something, a reminder that love, when it learns to listen, can build worlds. The art of change Zuri had grown into a name the community cherished. Her art hung in local galleries and schools across the region. Children painted their dreams with her every Saturday at the community art hall. She never forgot what it felt like to be unseen, so she made sure no child around her ever felt that way again. One afternoon, a young girl named Tomi tugged on her dress. Auntie Zuri, she said shyly, my father says art is just for fun, not for life. Zuri smiled softly and knelt beside her. Then show him what life looks like when you paint it, she said. The girl's face lit up, and in that moment, Zuri saw herself, the same spark that once burned quietly in a small garage years ago. A father's pride back at the garage, Daniel Okoro worked as he always did. Sleeves rolled up, tools scattered, the radio humming softly. But now, something new filled the air. Laughter, On one side of the workshop, Zuri's paintings lined the wall, vibrant portraits of workers, families, and the rhythm of daily life. The other half still buzzed with the sound of engines, but Daniel no longer worked alone. Local boys came to learn from him, not just about cars, but about perseverance. He often told them, "Fixing an engine is like raising a dream. You start with broken parts, but if you have patience, it will run again." When the boys asked about the paintings, Daniel would smile proudly and point. "That's my daughter's side. She paints what I fix." They laughed, but in his eyes was a pride that needed no words. A legacy shared one morning. Daniel was invited to speak at Zuri's Art Academy. The very one he once said was a waste of time. He stood before a hall full of students holding a small painting Zuri had given him, a picture of two hands joined across a canvas. He looked at the faces before him and spoke with the calm strength of a man who had learned through loss and love. "I once told my daughter that dreams don't feed you," he began. "But I was wrong. Dreams feed the heart, and when the heart is fed, everything else follows." The room was silent. Then came the applause, soft, respectful, and full of emotion. Zuri stood at the back, tears shining in her eyes. Closing scene. That evening, as the sun set over Oderin, Daniel sat outside his house, gazing at the mural across the street, the one of him and Zuri beneath the golden sky. The colors shimmered in the fading light, alive with warmth. Zuri walked up beside him, holding 2 cups of tea. She handed him one and sat quietly. After a moment, Daniel spoke softly. "You know, I used to dream of giving you the world. I didn't know you'd paint it instead." Zuri laughed gently, resting her head on his shoulder. "We built it together, Papa. You just used tools instead of brushes." He smiled, eyes glistening. "Maybe that's what life is, a workshop of dreams." The camera would pull back slowly, showing them sitting side by side, the mural behind them glowing in the orange dusk. The sound of children's laughter echoed in the distance. The next generation painting, dreaming, and believing. Fade out. Some dreams are inherited not by blood, but by courage. And sometimes, the greatest masterpiece we create is the life we choose to forgive and rebuild together.